Good morning. So, the last few weeks we've been talking about disciple making, the core mission of the church, because Jesus tells us all to go out and make disciples. Disciples make disciples. Why is disciple making the core mission of the church? Here's the short answer. Disciple making is our core mission because this is the method God uses for making us like Jesus. We don't become like Jesus on our own. God uses our intentional relationships with each other as we study the teachings of Jesus and live them together to make us like Jesus. This method could be called intentional relational transformation. If we want to become more like Jesus, we need to get used to being in intentional relationships with each other. A central choice you will have as a Christian, as a member of a church, is whether you will get close to people, close enough to where you can have a discipling relationship, and that will help you become like Jesus, or whether you will stay disconnected. Now, it's unlikely that the man, Siddhartha Gautama, consulted the baby name book when he named his baby boy. Here's what Gautama named his boy: Rahula. Rahula means chain or fetter. The reason he named his boy Rahula was probably because Gautama knew what he was about to do. Very soon after the boy was born, Gautama packed up, took one last look at his wife and baby boy, and he left them to go find enlightenment. According to the stories, he did find enlightenment, and that's why they call Gautama the Enlightened One, or in his language, the Buddha. Gautama knew that he would be leaving his family to seek enlightenment, and he knew that the baby boy would threaten to chain Gautama to home so that he would not want to leave. Leaving his wife and baby boy was probably the hardest thing he ever did, and that's why he named the baby boy Chain. He wanted to remind himself that you don't want to get too close, because when you get too close, it can hurt when you have to leave. It hurts less to stay disconnected. So it's no surprise that Buddhism says not to get too close to anything. Stay disconnected from anything that could capture your heart. Apparently, nobody told the Apostle Paul that it's best to stay disconnected. He didn't have a baby boy, but he did have a baby church, which he had planted. He actually had a few. But we already know that someday Paul's going to have to leave, because that's what Paul did. He would travel from city to city, country to country, planting churches. He would plant a church, train up the elders, and entrust the church to them, while he went to plant a new church in another city. One of the baby churches that Paul had planted was in the city of Ephesus, in what's modern-day Turkey. He had gotten to spend 3 wonderful years there in Ephesus building the church. And then at some point after leaving, he was actually able to travel back through again. Back together with the elders of the Ephesian church, he explained that this time it's probably goodbye for good. He was headed for Jerusalem, where he would likely be arrested. And that arrest does end up happening, where he visits Jerusalem, gets arrested, and then ends up sailing to Rome as a prisoner, which is where the book of Acts ends. So I have a question for you. With the knowledge that he would be leaving the Ephesian church, wouldn't it make sense that Paul wouldn't have wanted to get too close? And yet, as he's telling these elders goodbye for the final time, it feels almost like the last day of summer camp, where the campers are getting ready to go home, and they're all hugging and crying and promising, we're going to be friends forever. We're going to stay close. You get the feeling. Well, first, let's take a look at Acts 20, 36 to 38 again. And one verse in there in particular, where it says, they all wept as they embraced him and kissed him. What grieved them most was his statement that they would never see his face again. You get the feeling that this isn't the kind of church where you simply come, sit, sing, listen, and leave until next Sunday. This is a group of believers in Ephesus that is really connected. Maybe we should all stop and think. If I were to leave Fenwick Church of Christ today, if you were to leave Fenwick Church of Christ today, forever, would people care? Would they weep as they embraced you and grieve that they wouldn't see you again? I sure hope so. But that's something we should ask ourselves, I think. How did the church in Ephesus connect so deeply with each other? Well, I think we have two clues as to how they connected so deeply. Clue number one is tears. Acts 20, 17 to 19. In there it says, I served the Lord with great humility and with tears in the midst of severe testing. Acts 20, 31 says, for 3 years I never stopped warning each of you night and day with tears. And Acts 20, 37 says, they all wept as they embraced him and kissed him. The second clue to how they connected so deeply is truth. Acts 20, 20 to 21 says, I have not hesitated to preach anything that would be helpful to you, but have taught you publicly and from house to house. And Acts 20, verses 25 through 27 says, I have not hesitated to proclaim to you the whole will of God. These are real tears shared together, and Paul taught them the whole truth. So you might be asking, how do tears and truth connect people so deeply? It's because they are doing tears and truth together. Acts 20:18 says, how I lived the whole time I was with you. And Acts 20:20, I went from house to house. He was doing this together. They were in each other's homes, learning the truth together and crying tears together. A lot of us might see the closeness, the tearful closeness of the Ephesian church in Acts chapter 20 and prefer maybe a more come and go approach. Do we want to let other church people close enough to see our deepest hurts? Do we want to let other church people close enough to tell us the truth that we need to hear? And do we really want to invest in disciple making, which will mean radical changes to our lives? I have a couple illustrations for you. You might even relate to some of these. When Blu-ray players first came out, and I think everyone here remembers when that happened, did you know anybody dead set against buying a Blu-ray player? You yourself might have actually been one of those people. Now, if you tried to convince someone dead set against buying a Blu-ray player, it could have gone something like this. I don't want or need a Blu-ray player. Well, why not? Well, because I've got all of my DVDs, and I can't exactly play my DVDs on a Blu-ray player, can I? Well, you see, that's actually just it. You can play all your DVDs on a Blu-ray player. They play both Blu-ray and DVD. Really? Well, maybe I'll look into it at some point. Or, do you know anybody who was dead set against Facebook? I still know some people dead set against Facebook. And that's okay. Dave. The conversation might have gone something like this. I am not gonna get Facebook. Why not? You can connect with people who are really far away. Oh yeah, that's exactly what I want. I want everybody on the planet to see my information. Sounds like a wonderful idea. No. You won't have everybody on the planet seeing your information. You can set it up where only your friends see your information. Only people you pick. I don't know if you knew that, Dave. Only the people I pick. Well, I guess it might be something worth looking into at some point. Or finally, did you know somebody who was sure they would never get a smartphone? Vern. Well, perhaps the conversation went something like this. I don't need a smartphone, and I don't ever plan on getting one. Why not? Well, I'll tell you, my phone bill is already almost $100 a month, and I know this isn't Vern's reason, and I'm not about to double my phone bill to get a smartphone. Oh, well, a smartphone doesn't actually have to double your phone bill. In fact, I know of companies that can get you a data plan with a smartphone and a monthly bill that's probably half of what you're paying for right now. Oh, I didn't know that. Maybe I'll look into that. Now, these might seem silly, but the point is that in all of these examples, here's how the reasoning goes. No, if you sign up for such and such, you don't actually have to blank. You can still sign up without having to blank. You're sure I don't have to blank? That's right. Well, I guess I might consider signing up at some point. Now, I want you to take the word church and plug it in there, and you get the sales pitch that a lot of supposed Christians seem to have heard. I don't really want to start going to church. I don't know that I can really do the church thing. Well, why not? Well, I just don't have that kind of time, for one thing. I've got a really full schedule, and I've already got enough of a social life. I just don't think I have time to do the church thing. Oh, don't worry about it. It's basically just a Sunday morning thing. It just takes 1 hour Sunday mornings. And honestly, you can come only half the time. It's not a big deal. I mean, there are classes Sunday morning, and there's small groups and things like that, but you don't really have to stress out about those. I mean, doing the church thing can be really easy. It doesn't have to demand that much of you. The reality is that church minus intentional togetherness is actually something less than church. You might be able to have Facebook minus everybody on the planet having your information. You might be able to have a smartphone minus doubling the cost. But you cannot have the church minus togetherness. It doesn't work that way. Hoping to have church minus intentional togetherness is like asking, now if I sign up for tennis, I don't actually have to hit the ball, do I? Or, now if I sign up for piano lessons, I don't actually have to play the notes, do I? Or even, now if I buy the movie Frozen and Frozen 2 from Disney and bring it home to my daughters, I won't have to hear my daughters singing the songs all day long, will I? I think that's probably in my future. Church is doing tears together. It's doing truth together. Christians need to be telling each other that it matters what they're going through. That's why we do tears together, why we cry together. And Christians need to be telling each other that it matters what they become, who they are. That's why we do truth together. That's what church really is. In the modern world, it's easy to think, well, we're pretty busy. We've got a lot going on. I'm not really sure I have time to go to church in this intentional, relational way. Yet back in the time of Ephesus, they had their own busyness and distractions. We have shopping to do, but the Ephesians also had a huge market in the middle of the city. We have sports to watch, but the Ephesus had a stadium to watch sporting events, chariot races, and gladiator fights. We have movies to watch, but Ephesus had a 24,000 seating capacity theater. We have websites to visit, or physical sites to visit, attractions, things like that. But Ephesus had a temple which was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Talk about a tourist attraction. Yes, we're busy, but so were the Ephesians, and they still made time for intentional, relational discipleship. Don't waste what you've been given. If you're part of a church, you have been given a beautiful, wonderful opportunity to grow, to become more like Jesus, and to help others do the same. Don't waste what you've been given here. There's a story told of a boy named Peter who was always bored. He was always waiting for whatever came next in life and never satisfied with life right now. In winter, he longed for summer. In summer, he couldn't wait to go sledding in the snow. Now, sadly, I can relate to that. But one day, Peter was walking in the forest when an old, strange woman offered him a magic silver ball. And if you look closely, you could see a golden thread dangling out of this silver ball. That's your life's thread, Peter. If you leave it alone, nothing will change. But if you pull on the string, an hour will pass like a second. You can make it speed through whatever part of life is uncomfortable or unfun. And you'll be on to something more comfortable and more fun with just the pull of a thread. He grabbed it out of her hands with an eager smile. But remember, she said, once the thread has been pulled, it cannot be pushed back in again. And so Peter went to school with the magic ball in his pocket. And, of course, he started to feel bored. And then he remembered the thread, which he tugged. And suddenly, the teacher was telling everybody to get ready to go home. After a few days like this, Peter thought it would be fun to simply skip all the way to summer break. And eventually he decided to jump past school altogether and head to graduation. And then he was ready to get married when an official letter came saying he had been drafted into the military to go to war. Now, after the military got burdensome, he gave that thread a good tug, and he was home with his new wife. He and his beautiful wife had a baby, and he was able to make the child's fussy nights and seasons of sickness pass in a moment. When times were hard at work, he tugged the thread, and the times were immediately better. So much easier, though, when the kids would be out of the house, he began to think. When they didn't have such a crowded house and a tight budget. And so with a small tug, all the kids were out of the house with their own families. His wife was starting to show her age, often ill. And it was tough to see her suffering, so he tugs. Next thing you know, they're an old, white-haired couple now. And Peter had now had a life without boredom and without pain. And yet, Peter realized that such a life had itself been boring. He feels now the pain of emptiness, like there's something missing. And he realizes the real gift wasn't a magic ball. The real gift was his lifetime. And the problem was that he had just skimmed through it. Is church always amazing? No. Is it guaranteed that if you spend more time with church people, you will always walk away with a smile? No. Sometimes we annoy each other. That's what families do to each other sometimes. Church is a family, and church is far from perfect. It's made up of us, after all. And yet church, warts and blemishes and all, is the real gift. The church is God's gift to us, to help us through and grow us up. And we really don't want to skim through this gift, only giving an hour, if that, to it each week. You don't want to get to the point where you look at your life and realize that even though you're growing older, you haven't been growing up. Because instead of really doing church, you've been doing something less than church. It's in doing tears together and truth together, in having these intentional relational discipleship relationships, that we find ourselves not only growing older together, but growing up into something truly beautiful. What do these intentional church relationships grow us into? The truth is, you won't grow as a Christ follower without community, without church. And we grow through these relationships to be more like Jesus. Ephesians 4:11-16, Paul says, we will grow to become in every respect the mature body of Him who is the head, that is Christ. From Him the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love, as each part does its work. If we want to become like Jesus, we will need to value church, value each other. We will get close to people to the point where we can have these discipling relationships, these open exchanges where we share our suffering and we tell each other the truth. These relationships that help us to become like Jesus. We know that Jesus values the church. The question is whether or not we will value the church. Now, how much did Jesus value the church exactly? Acts 20, verse 28 tells us, the church of God, which he bought with his own blood. Apparently, the church was worth God's blood. You can't value something more highly than that. So clearly, church should be worth our time. So let's lean into really doing church as Jesus set it up. Let's connect in intentional relationships so that we can truly be discipled by each other and disciple others. How many of you remember a time when you, or maybe your parents, had someone over after church on Sunday for lunch almost every week? Why did we stop doing that? Or for something I love is my life group. We do studies together and things like that. But for the rest of this summer, we're taking a break from studies and we're just getting together once a week to spend time together and do life together, to just connect and have fun, to build a relationship. And then we're going to do some more studies in the fall. But we're connecting. We're building relationship. So let's all reconnect. It can be beautiful. And it's what was intended. So I'll say it one more time. Let's connect in intentional relationships so that we can truly be discipled and disciple others. So that we can fulfill the mission of the church given to us by Jesus. And so that we can become like Jesus. Let's connect. Stay a little bit later after service and have some coffee or something and talk to someone you don't normally talk to. Or this afternoon at 3 p.m. in the Fonthill Park, we're getting together for a band show. And hopefully to share Jesus with people who don't know him. That's a way to connect with each other and with unbelievers. So let's invest in intentional relationships. Let's be a discipling church.